Have here
A
from
bank run on Russian banks inside Moscow today. Is the Russian economy actually collapsing? Whimsy, I was under the impression the Russian economy had been collapsing for quite some time. Sorry.
it's interesting when they started to fire the Wagner group. It was when they had run out of money to pay private armies, and I think that that
Uh-huh.
was a lesson for the United States, that we can't afford a private army either. And they go with the private army because the private armies can break the rules, can break the Constitution of Russia. Same with the United States. They can go in, these private contractors, and do things that U.S. service people are not allowed to do, and they get paid more. But they also have no loyalty to the country. They're not necessarily, they're soldiers of fortunes that are brutal, brutal people who do brutal, brutal things to protect the interests of millionaires and billionaires and trade routes. And so I understand we need trade routes, and I understand we want to keep our oil prices down. But it can bankrupt a country if you're in a war and you can't pay your private soldiers. So that was the beginning of the end for their economy, was when they had to start firing their private contractors, and they couldn't accept the fact that they were losing the war. So they started borrowing from everybody. They even started using North Korean troops at one point because they didn't have any money. And the North Koreans had never been in combat. They only knew how to terrorize their own citizens, but they had never been in an actual war with anybody. So they simply ran to their deaths while being shot to death in some kind of bizarro sense of loyalty to Kim Jong-un, because they were doing his bidding. So he went and sacrificed a bunch of people who didn't mean anything to him anyway to go and die. They weren't competent soldiers. You know what I mean? So, and the last vision I had, Putin was turning on his own church. So a little bit.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. He's raiding the churches for their gold.
That is absolutely true.
That's
Yes.
desperation,
So
and we know he's been sending like teenage boys, like 14-year-olds, out on the front lines because the armies are so depleted.
Right. And I think the other thing that people need to realize is that there was a huge revolution that took place in Britain, where the Catholic Church collapsed, and you had the Church of England under King Henry VIII. And so the head of the church is the royal family. So when people were scapegoating, oh, it's the fault of the Jews, Epstein, nobody wanted to touch the Church of England, even though his brother is the head of the Church of England, right? So that was the kind of control that Putin wanted. He wanted the control of being the head of the church. And so when we look at Putin and we look at Putin's relationship with the church, that's exactly what we're talking about. He rules, and he is the head of the church, just as King Charles is the head of the British church. And this is really right. And so, but what we have to understand is that the church is rabidly anti-Semitic. They were fueling the pogroms and the genocide against the Jewish people in Eastern Europe, which is what drove the Jewish people out of Eastern Europe to Palestine, by the way, was the Russian church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, the pogroms. And so I think it was naive to assume that Putin was going to all of a sudden be a friend to the Jewish people, a friend of Israel, that he was, that he was going to become this incredibly tolerant person, when he fashioned himself as the head of this church with a notoriously anti-Semitic, racist track record. Doesn't like black people either. They want only a white nation, white as the snow. The Russians should be as pure as the Russian snow, right? It's kind of glorification of inbreeding of the white people. So it's a eugenic vision. It's a Victorian eugenic vision coming straight from Great Britain, because this is what the Victorians under Queen Victoria thought, that the sun was never going to set on Queen Victoria's, and they believed in eugenics, which was, they invented this science where they were 100% convinced that the British royal families had the highest IQ. They created the IQ test, and then they created the answers, which would show that they were the smartest people because they were the ones that wrote the questions.
I never knew that.
Yeah. So
Isn't that
Galton,
ingenious?
I believe his name was Sir Francis Galton. He was the cousin of um, Darwin. And that was what people thought back then. They thought that if you were going to evolve towards, further from the ape, it was because you were of the white race and you were the aristocrats. And it was an attempt to justify the aristocrats being in control and not giving power to the socialist. And so there was a socialist revolution again to break free of the church and these eugenic ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So the Jews ran from Eastern Europe and they ran from the church, which was very closely connected to Queen Victoria and these incredibly racist ideas, which the church has retained to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And so Putin is the head of that church. So what's happening with this church now that Russia is bankrupted? Well, all the money that he and his henchmen, when 10% of their theft went to the church in forgiveness donations, right?
Tithing.
Tithing so
Yeah.
that they wouldn't go to hell for all the horrible, terrible things they had done, right?
Yeah.
So this is so now he's thinking, how can I raid the church? Because the only people right now that are left with money is his church.
Yeah. And as
Isn't that
head of the church,
crazy?
he probably sees it as his property.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, don't you just think this whole thing is absolutely insane?
Well, of course it's insane. I just keep thinking of how Donald Trump uses religion, or at least he tries to, organized religion, fundamentalist Christianity, and so forth. And when we've seen where that's gone. Let's see, Joel Tilson, Russian officials making more threats to Europe today. I didn't see, I did a quick, a scan of news stories today. I didn't see that. Did you see that, Whimsy?
I think Putin called them little piggies.
Little
pig. Little piggies. Yes.
Oh, how ironic.
You called the European leaders little. You're all a bunch of little piggies.
Well, and remember I said there's such parallels with Trump, who just recently called a female reporter piggy.
Yes, and he keeps encroaching on NATO space to try. What you going to do about it? What you going to do about it? Like I think he encroached on Estonia today.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
So in addition to that, all roads and rail lines cut off from Kaliningrad in the last few days. Here's my feeling about this, you guys. I think that the data is irrefutable that Putin has to be removed. Would you agree, Chuck?
Oh, yes. Well, we've been saying that for quite a while.
Would you agree? I want to also go on record and say that I do real research, that there's, meditation where we try to get into the heads of another person and see what they're feeling and thinking. We do that, but we also do real research. And so I want to paraphrase. Right. So,
Grok calling him the most dangerous man in the world.
Grok did, but so did ChatGPT and everybody else. So I just want to say that when this was a 3-day period of me doing research, and I didn't expect anybody to listen to me. I'm a nobody. I know I'm just a little whimsy, right? But I thought it would be interesting challenge with supercomputers to see if we could find out how to keep people alive. Like what are if you're looking at fear of war, right?
Yeah.
If you're talking about, I want to keep people from dying, what do I have to do to keep people from dying? I just thought it would be interesting. What would the computer come up with? And this is the 5 phases that the computers agreed on. And what's interesting is that we were able to kind of find out what the United States under Biden, what the intelligence agencies were planning, because we were asking the same questions that they're asking. Don't you think that's amazing, Chuck?
It's astounding how accessible this information really is.
Right. If you ask the right question, yeah.
You just have to phrase the questions correctly.
Right. So Grok in December 20th of 2023 said that this is what the intelligence agencies should do: get to ceasefire in Gaza, exchange the hostages, and lure Hamas to a host country, and then begin the rebuild. And once you get that settled, move your attention to Putin and contain him and remove him.
Mm-hmm.
So my feeling is that if they're going to do this, they're not going to tell the general public, but you and I know because we crunched the numbers and we played with supercomputers and we accidentally fell upon. First off, the first 3 phases were adopted by Biden and Trump because that was the data that the intelligence agencies came to, because they were asking the same exact questions. How do we keep people alive? Isn't that incredible that we were able to find out what they were doing? No, they're listening to you, Whimsy. You have the no. I don't believe
Pat
that.
yourself on the back.
I think it was just an accident that we started asking the right questions, and then the computer started pumping out the same information it was giving the Pentagon and everybody else. That's what I think happened. But we can pretend that I'm running the show. Yeah. No, but what's interesting is that we got the compute. We are aligned with Israel, NATO, the United States, etc. This is the 3 phases adopted by the United Nations Council as well. That's part of. So the next question we all have to ask is, does that mean number 4 is next up? You see what I'm saying? So if they're planning on, you see how I'm going with this?
Yeah.
So, and we already had begun to dismantle Iranian leadership by dismantling first their proxies, which is how Syria collapsed. So they started doing that too.
Yeah.
So, and they've already said that Iran and Russia will not be part of the Abraham Accords, that they can't be bribed. So I think if the computer steered us right, and it appears that the computer steered us right, Putin, they're probably planning on removing him, and it's not public information. That's what I don't know. What do you think, Chuck?
Well, I mean, we've been reading on this, in an unscientific way. We've been, with our cards, we've been getting this for months and months. It's going to happen. Right. And I'm also struck by, it seems to be coinciding with Donald Trump's removal. It's like both men may go around the same time. That's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, as you saw, the computer was doing its thing December 20th, 2023, and I said, I wanted it to be as few words as possible and then just send it.
Yeah.
I was really desperate to help. I don't know if what they adopted. I'm feeling like some of my ideas were adopted, but when something horrible happens like a war, and every civilian wants to just help. How can I help? But the other thing I would just say is, and I went back and I rechecked this a couple of days ago, and because you all asked me to check with Chat GPT, I took what Grok had gotten it down to 6 things. Yeah. And I had gone back about the Abraham Accords, and they were like, warning, do not give them money. They'll just use it to kill you. Right. Like, so then I took it and I also went to Chat GPT, and Chat GPT agreed with the phases. They didn't talk about China. Maybe I got to go back and ask about China. But I think they think that we can work some trade out with China. Yeah. Like it would devastate us economically to take out China. We're too dependent.
Did you take those actual sentences from Grok and feed them into Chat GPT, or did you have to rephrase it?
I took.
So it's like a checks and balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also checked with others, with a couple of other sites as well. And what they said was, a few days ago, I checked again, and the computer said he remains the greatest existential threat to the planet. Putin. Danger, danger, danger. We are moving towards a minute to midnight. The nuclear weapon, we could be at a nuclear, he must be removed. Warning. I mean, you can't sit around and philosophize, but you also can't be public and say, you got a guy, he's holding a country hostage, Ukraine, he's got guns, he's got the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, he can blow the whole thing up. This guy is mentally unstable, he's broke, and he's increasingly desperate.
Same thing could be said about Donald Trump.
Right.
He's desperate, and he's got his hands literally on the nuclear codes. Both of these men represent such a threat to our planet, to humanity. But but it's interesting that Putin was found to be the worst threat, because I think Trump has to be not too far behind.
See, this is what Grok is talking about. They're
Yeah.
now encroaching on NATO. What are we going to do? Just let them march and take our country, take the West? I mean, there really is no choice. They really are going to have to remove this guy. There is,
Absolutely.
I tried so many ways to avoid this with the computer, and the
Yeah.
computer kept saying, I know what you're trying to do there. Like the data is the data.
Yeah.
This guy has threatened, I'm going to blow up Zaporizhzhia nuclear. It's the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. I'm going to kill y'all. I mean, this guy, he is a psychopath. This guy's got to be removed.
Oh, sure. Well, all that
Yeah.
nuclear radiation would just envelop the entire planet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's such a cliche, but nobody wins a nuclear war.
Yeah. So so as far as, look, we can be emotional about it, and Elon Musk has definitely weighed in many, many times on it. It's an open conversation. The
Mhm.
5 phases is an open conversation because everybody has started calculating, and everybody's like, these are the phases.
Mhm.
And Elon has said, no, we should just end the war and give Putin what he wants because this is a meat grinder and people are dying. And that's just makes no sense to
No,
me,
it makes no sense whatsoever.
because he'll just refuel and get more powerful and then attack more parts of the West.
Exactly. Exactly.
And the computer agreed with me. And so I'm like, why would a guy who's supposed to be one of the smartest people in the world, who funded Grok, be disagreeing with Grok? That doesn't even make, that's what I couldn't figure out. Your own computer doesn't agree with you, Mr. Musk.
Yeah. What do you make of that, Whimsy?
He's being emotional and not logical and not looking at data, which is what I've come out publicly and said. The data is the data. I didn't do this. I mean, like, this is not, don't put it on me, man. I was trying to save the guy. I tried, I was got to give him the benefit of the doubt. It's like, when you're threatening nuclear war and you're as dangerous as this guy, there is no plan B. So
No.
we can be, I think the takeaway here that everybody needs to take away, because they've already unveiled that they're following the first 3. We can assume that that is exactly what they're planning, but they're not going to talk about it publicly.
No.
And I think that Putin knows that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we can't get him out to that castle in Siberia fast enough. Remember, we were predicting that last summer, that he would be exiled to Siberia, but probably some palatial mansion or something. He'll be under house arrest or something like that.
That's what former Russian people that are people that are experts in Russian diplomacy have said, that they will never turn him over to the West. It will never happen. They never have, and they never will. It's simply not done in Russia. We're not going to turn our people over to the Hague to be tried.
I was just going to say, to the Hague to be tried. Yeah.
That's what we want, but there's no way. The best we can hope for is that they're going to give him a nice life, just like they did with Gorbachev and Yeltsin. Go retire somewhere and never be seen again. All right. So
yeah.
Are we ready to do the impasse prayer and do some blitzes?
Okay. All right. Joel had a question here, but do you want to go on with the blitzes?
Well,
because I know a lot of people are probably wanting to talk about this one. I don't know if you want to do it or do it later with the cards.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Joel Tilson's asking, was Trump in a manic state last night during his speech? I read all kinds of pieces today. People speculating that he was high last night. I read somewhere that his doctors